my name is Sangeetha Menon. I'm a philosopher and also very much into art activities. And I run a program on consciousness in the institute called National Institute of Advanced Studies. This is the inaugural episode of the program called Consciousness Conversations. And this program is primarily to bring in together extraordinary minds and connect them to extraordinary minds. The idea is to connect people who think very differently to people who think very differently, and not only think, sometimes, the way we express our thoughts also is very important. So the whole goal is that people who work in the area of consciousness can bring in social change by their being and also by their expressing using different disciplines in humanities, performance, visual arts, and so on. So that's the whole idea. So let me not take much time to start, introduce the program. You already have some introductory material to know more about it. And we will be organizing this program in a periodic manner. So, but at this point, I don't know when will be the next one. But today I have a very interesting and extraordinary people to present to you. And let me introduce very briefly my friends who will be joining at this inaugural episode of Consciousness Conversation. First is Aliya, and I think Aliya is still not joined. I don't see her. So Jonardon Ganeri, who is a philosopher and a very interesting thinker, and many of you would have heard his name as well from his books, and also the Bangaloreans particularly know him because he was conferred the Infosys Prize some years back, and many of us also read his books very passionately. My other friend from Singapore, so Jonardon is joined from Canada, and my other friend, Dr. Kathirasan, is an absolutely versatile personality, a musician, a researcher in meditation and philosophy, and a scholar in Advaita too, because we have had some conversations earlier, and that's how I met him in Singapore. So absolutely brilliant personality, and with his music, and I hope you will get to know from him more about his work. And I think Aliya has just joined. Can someone make her the co-host so that she's here? And okay, my other friend, hi Aliya. So my other friend is Santosh Nair, and he is going to be the surprise element in this meeting. I'm not going to tell you how he is going to converse with you, but it will be in an absolutely spectacular manner. And let me keep that surprise as it is. I hope you people are there because I don't see any videos. Why don't you see it? Show your faces at least for a while so that I know who you are. And Santosh and his colleague, Mr. Ajay Gupta, also, I think if I know it correct, if I said his name correctly, yeah, he is also there. So there is a surprise element from the clouds, which let me just stop there. And another very extraordinary mind who has joined us today is Aliya Grig from Los Angeles, if I'm right. And I hope she is the co-host as well. Okay, I'm just making her the co-host. Yeah. So amazing personality. So let me not introduce them in a detailed manner, but we get an opportunity to listen to them, listen from them about their work. But amazing personality, Aliya Grig, in the cutting edge of AI, bringing in empathy to it. And many people, when I said, okay, we have a guest who is working on AI and empathy, is it what? AI and empathy, can they be together at all? So it's amazing to have Aliya here. So once again, a great welcome to Kadir, my friend, Jonardon, Santosh, Aliya, and of course, all of you who have joined for this podcast today to listen to us. So we will have a conversational mode, and I see a lot of familiar friends, Ashish Datta, Hi, Ashish. So people who are here are from the corporate, from academics, and hi, Ashwin Patel, again from corporate, but also dedicated to philosophy. And we are also planning to do some things together. So let's start the program. And so first, let me request each one of our conversationalists to talk about themselves in a few minutes, and then we will see how it goes. So let me first start with Aliya, if she's still there.
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah. Yes, Aliya. So maybe may I request you to just talk about you a little bit, so our friends who has joined this conversation today get to know you.
Yeah, sure. So hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Aliya Grig. I'm a tech entrepreneur with a 15 years background. I previously launched my own projects in the fields of renewable energy and space tech. And for the last 7 years, I've been researching the topic of AGI, artificial general intelligence, and I'm building my own artificial intelligence and artificial consciousness system, which is created at the intersection of cognitive science, neuroscience, neurobiology, research on human psychology, human empathy, and artificial intelligence. And we currently have a team of over 25 people. We are creating empathetic robots, both virtual one and currently building our own physical one. We are creating our also B2B and B2C products. One of our core products is AI Companion, who can provide empathy and who can support people during their life journey. And we are also working closely with Stanford University, Amazon, and NVIDIA. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Aliya, and I'm sure we will get to talk a little more about your work and interesting and exciting area of your contributions. May I now request Jonardon to introduce yourself and to say something about you. Jonardon, you have to unmute yourself. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Forgot how to use Zoom now. Yeah, I'm a professor of philosophy at the University of Toronto. My work draws on a variety of philosophical traditions to construct new positions in the philosophy of mind, metaphysics, and epistemology. My books include Attention, Not Self, which is a study of early Buddhist theories of attention, The Concealed Art of the Soul, which is an analysis of the idea of a search for one's true self, looking at the classical Indian sources. Recently, I published Virtual Subjects, Fugitive Selves, which is an analysis of the Portuguese poet Fernando Pessoa's philosophy of self, and also a little book called Inwardness, an Outsider's Guide, a review of the concept of inwardness in literature, film, poetry, and philosophy across cultures.
Yes, thank you, Jonardon, for that introduction. And may I now request my friend, Dr. Kathirasan from Singapore, to introduce yourself and to present yourself. And I know you are a well-known person as well, but maybe request you to say a few lines about yourself.
Thank you, Sangeetha. So it's a pleasure to be here. I am a big fan of non-dualism, non-dual consciousness. That's where it all began for me. And from that foundation, I play multiple roles. And the multiple roles that I play, I'm a musician. I'm also the founder and the CEO of the Center for Mindfulness in Singapore, as well as in India, in Vietnam, and Malaysia. I'm also a founder of a OD consulting company. And I also conduct research into mindfulness and also research into specifically Advaita Vedanta. That's my area of specialization, also my area of classical training as well. Very happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Kathir. So as I said, there is a surprise element today. I hope the surprise will not be let out, but I don't want to miss inviting Santosh Nair and his colleague to introduce themselves. Hi, Santosh.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having us on this wonderful conversation, Sangeetha. So what Ajay and I do, we get to connect dots as we hear conversations, and I think we will leave it at that. It's always a pleasure and a learning ground for us whenever we be a part of different sorts of conversations. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think we are good to go now. We have already started moving. And I know that today's audience come from very different fields, from corporate, from academics, from hospitals. And of course, there are students as well. So it's absolutely a pleasure to meet all of you. So what we are going to do is we are going to have small conversations with all the conversationalists today. And we would also have some time dedicated at the very end, perhaps about 20 minutes, to converse with you, which means you would have a question by raising your hand, and I will recognize you, and then I'll unmute you, and so on. But to begin with, so when we talk about consciousness, there are several questions, and I'm not going to go into those abstract questions on myself, but I would perhaps request the conversationalists to have their own ways of presenting consciousness and the different aspects of it, and the self being something very important. And also we have the questions of being together, and a whole lot of experiences play a bigger role when it comes to the discussion on being together, and empathy being one of the foremost in that. So first, let me request Aliya Grig, perhaps to talk about the challenges which you see in your work, and how do you bring in empathy, and what is your understanding of consciousness? So it's a large canvas, and you may pick and choose any of the questions, or you may just have your own question and respond to them. Is Aliya Grig?
Yeah, sure. So it's a broad question, but in general, well, from my perspective and from my approach, and that's actually part of our research inside our company and inside our team, we see consciousness, and I see personal consciousness, as an intersection of different, I would say, areas of human life, because it includes questions about empathy, emotions, and feelings. It includes metaphysical part, which what is our soul about and how it came to this world. It has also a physical part, and here we work closely with quantum theories and electromagnetic field theories in order to recognize what is consciousness in terms of the physical, I would say, process. And then, of course, it's a question of the mind, decision making, and so on, and how consciousness reflects our cognitive skills as for a human being. And of course, we also put to the question of the consciousness the philosophical aspects, and all of this is a part of our research regarding creating of the new level of the architecture for artificial consciousness. Because I believe that in order to create a new generation of machines and robots, both virtual ones and physical ones, we need to create not only, I would say, intelligence, but consciousness. We need to create artificial machine and robots which can reflect on themselves, can have a self-awareness, can have feelings, and can have emotions. Because this is the only way how we can create AI for good and can create systems and machines that will help humanity to solve different complex problems, like creating a cure and care for, I would say, heart diseases like cancer, to open new, I would say, technologies for space exploration, because only through consciousness we can really create and bring creative processes to this world. And that's actually what I described. It's our philosophy and the research part of our team and of our company, Evolwe. And that's what we are building on a daily basis. We are building basically a new type of architecture for artificial consciousness based on this intersection of different areas. And another thing that I think that what brings consciousness an interesting topic is the ability to bring this creativity, because we are also diving deep into the nature of creativity and nature of learning, because like kids, they don't need lots of computational resources to learn something new and to create something new. They just do it like from scratch, basically, and from a new learning methodology. So that's why we are interested also in the research on learning and on creativity. And another angle also for artificial consciousness, in my opinion, is our integration and our, I would say, how we work with the world outside. It's called in robotics, it's called embodiment. So how we are embodied in the physical world, and how this world influences us and how we influence this world. And it's also part of our research, and we are building currently robots which are integrated in the physical world, and we bring this new system of learning through this physical world, because we are, as a human beings, we learn a lot from a physical world, from physical nature, and from I would say relationships with other people, with the world, with the environment. So I hope I briefly answered your question.
Yes, definitely, Aliya, and some of the expressions which you made or descriptions which you made, such as artificial consciousness, brought in a kind of a surprise in my mind, and I'm sure many people would have something to add to it. But I think we'll get into that conversation a little later, because I'm also mindful of the time. So may I now request Jonardon to give a wide range of your views on perhaps what is happening in the context of consciousness studies, and to you, what is the self as a philosopher, and how would you understand even something like an artificial consciousness? Jonardon, please.
Thanks, Sangeetha. Yes. So you've asked me to address a broad range of questions. What is consciousness? What is the self? And especially, what is the edge of the self? Because that's the theme of this conversation. So let me try and have a stab at answering those questions from the perspective of a philosopher. So, what is consciousness? I mean, for philosophers, consciousness is most basically the subjective quality of experience. That is to say, how it feels from within to have some experience. There's something that it's like to smell the fragrance of a jasmine or taste a juicy laddu. And there's something that it's like to feel elated or depressed. Perhaps there's even something it's like to think about a hard problem in mathematics or to appreciate a fine painting. And it's this something that it's like, which philosophers call the quality or the subjective quality of the experience. And that's what philosophers mean when they talk about consciousness. Now, what about the self? That's a trickier one. Historically, philosophers have tended to identify the self with a kind of inner agent, the one who does one's thinking and wills one's willings. But that idea has run into many difficulties, most of which were pointed out by the Buddhists a long time ago. So nowadays, it's more usual to identify the self with the subject of experience, or as opposed to the agent, the subject of experience, that is to say, with the one who has or owns one's experience, the seat of subjectivity, if you like to call it that, whether or not it plays any agentive role in bringing an experience about. Now, what about the edge of the self? One way to tackle that question is to appeal to metaphors about boundaries. And the ones I'm going to appeal to, or prefer to appeal to, are metaphors of the door and the bridge. In fact, the eminent sociologist George Simmel wrote about this in a very famous essay originally published in 1909, entitled Bridge and Door. he said that every act of separation demands and requires a coordinate act of connection. Edges can't exist without bridges and doors, nor bridges and doors without edges. And he said that that's the very essence of our selfhood or our humanity. He said, human being is the connecting creature who must always separate and cannot connect without separating. He said, precisely because it can be opened, a door's closure provides the feeling of a stronger isolation against everything outside than a mere unstructured wall. The wall is mute, but the door speaks. So the thought is that it's essential to the idea of being human that even as we put ourselves behind walls, we preserve for ourselves the freedom to find the bridges and the doors that would enable us to transit between the spaces they separate. Simel hits on something fundamental when he describes the human being as the bordering creature which has no borders. What he means by that, I think, is that if walls require doors, then doors create spaces of their own, which exist in their own right, without lying on either side of the separation. I mean, who can cross a land border, the threshold between two countries, without hesitating for a moment to enjoy the thrill of standing between them in that no-go zone that exists somehow outside of both? If walls are what create barriers, they also what give rise to these strangely interstitial and ephemeral spaces. Now, I think you can find this idea about the edge of the self in some unexpected places. The words of the translingual novelist Andrei Makin is one such place. Makin summarizes experience as follows. He says, strangely, or rather quite logically, it's at moments like this when I find myself between two languages that I believe I can see and feel more intensely than ever. It's not when he's writing in one language or another language, but when he's between the two. He's saying that there's a certain region for thought and feeling, an ephemeral but real world that consists in the interspace of the vestibule or the foyer. Makin describes himself as at his most intense when he's thinking not in French or in Russian, but in the vestibule between them. I think many people have made this space, this interstitial space, their own, as though the mixed-race philosopher Selina Simpson perfectly describes as the space between the ideas, books, traditions, practitioners, and conversations, a space so vast and full of messy life, a space in which I understand myself more clearly, a space I embrace as my own. Another person who sees this is the architect Arata Izozaki. He said, I can't be Japanese and I can't be Western, but I understand both. I'm double-binded, but, and perhaps this is the most important, I'm also in a position that generates a great deal of energy and creativity, precisely by being in between the two and not located in one or the other. And in fact, let me finish by saying that the idea is already a very, very old one. In his book, 3 Ways to be Alien, Sanjay Subramanian tells the story of Yahya, a 16th century Berber adventurer. And Yahya says the following. He says, from the day I returned to this country, I've had neither the pleasure nor rest with the Christians, nor even less with the Moors. The Moors say I'm Christian, and the Christians say I'm Moor. And so I hang in balance without knowing what I should do with myself. So what makes the interstitial space, the self's edge, a vestibule of creativity is, I think, that one is forced to think on one's feet when faced with the loss of a single system of support, single frame of reference. Pushing back in opposite directions simultaneously, one must force this space into existence because the door bangs shut unless it's held open.
Okay, Jonathan, I think, okay, I think that's a pause from Jonathan, and I see him muted. So I guess, okay, I think we will get back to what our friends have said a little later, but I want to talk to everybody. So may I now request Dr. Kathirasan to respond to perhaps, some of the questions we have already enlisted. So according to you, what is the edge of the self? Because you are definitely standing on an edge, working on the non-dualist philosophy for so many years, running an institution on mindful meditation and doing absolutely beautiful music and releasing albums and being so well known in Singapore and perhaps in India as well. So Dr. Kadir.
Thank you, Sangeetha. So it was, I really enjoyed the presentations from Aliya and Jonardon as well. Now, I look at consciousness broadly as twofold. Now, one fold or one way of presenting consciousness is as a differentiated form of consciousness. Now, this includes artificial intelligence, cognitive consciousness, and anything that is pertaining to the self. When I use the word self, I'm using it from the standpoint of the body, sense, mind complex. That is one type, one category, or one way of looking at consciousness. Sometimes you can even call it a perspective. Now, the second type or second perspective is to categorize or look at consciousness as something that is undifferentiated. Now, the second form of undifferentiated consciousness is something that causes something else. So that is why I look at that consciousness as something that is non-dual. By using the word non-dual, I see this consciousness as being the substratum of everything that is second to it. So whatever that I have categorized as differentiated consciousness, which includes the world of thoughts, artificial intelligence, whatever that is dynamic, whatever that changes, whatever that belongs to something that we call as multiplicity, or the variety of things in the world, do have a connection with this undifferentiated consciousness. And this is also related to the self. Am I part of this consciousness? It's a good question to think about. So I do, as a self, I see myself as having also a differentiated self, which involves the body, sense, mind complex, which is also the part of me that composes music, the part of me that writes poems, lyrics, and relates with people. And there is also a part of me that is also undifferentiated, which happens to be the substratum of all that I see. And I get a glimpse of it in deep sleep every day. So this is how I see consciousness. This is how I see from the first person's, as a first person experience. This is how I see it. Sangeetha.
Thank you so much, Kadir, for that very beautiful sharing of your work, your passion. And now perhaps what we will do is, since also the time is ebbing, maybe I will invite our friends today, Kadir, Jonathan, Aliya, to talk about perhaps what they just shared to us, if they have a question to each other. But maybe before that, I don't know whether Santosh Nair has something to tell us, or is it not time, or should I wait, or should we wait, or Santosh, maybe we should wait. Yes, so this is amazing because Santosh is a visual artist and a digital recorder. So he records what we say in voice and text in the form of amazing creative art. And you could see, that what he is doing now, and let me not interpret it, but because it talks for itself. But it's amazing that we have to look at perhaps our own self and the expressions of our own self in a creative frame as well. And this is amazing, Santosh. Yes, we hang in a balance, absolutely. And there is a subjective quality to every moment of our experience. And yes, that's right. Thank you so much, Santosh, for that absolutely surprising and magical sharing of what's going on now. And I think that is the door to consciousness, something so surprising, something which breaks our monotonous ways of thinking. And so we look forward to more from him. And meanwhile, let me request any of the conversationalists, Aliya, Kadir, and Jonardon, to talk to themselves. If you have a question to any one of you, please unmute yourself and just say to whom you want to ask that question or share your comment.
I could start if you want. I wanted to ask Kathira, this notion of the non-dual consciousness that you experience in deep sleep. Would you describe that as a self or as an impersonal, a form of consciousness that's selfless, or would you describe it as itself a self? That's what I wanted to ask you.
Whom do you want, Kadir, or whom are you?
Kathirasan, Doctor.
Yes, Kathirasan. Yes, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Jonardon, for that question. Now, I used the deep sleep as an example of a non-dual experience, but not the non-dual experience in itself. Why? Because if I treat the deep sleep experience as something that is non-dual or something that is undifferentiated, then I would not have an end to it, or neither would I have a beginning to it. Because as the differentiated self, I'm subject to three experiences uncontrollably: the waking state, the dream state, and the deep sleep state. So when I'm talking about that non-dual state, I'm as it is usually said by the ancient Indic philosophers, the deep sleep state happens to give us a glimpse of that non-dual state, but it is not non-dual in that sense. That's how I look at it. So I see that undifferentiated consciousness as pervading it's concomitant to all the three states of waking, dream, as well as deep sleep. I hope that, that I may not have answered the question, but I hope that opens the door to what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So perhaps I should move to the other participants as well. Professor Ravi Singh from Delhi University, Department of Philosophy, he has asked a very interesting question, and I can't find where he is so that I can unmute him. Yes, so nice to see you, Dr. Ravi Singh. He is from Delhi University and Department of Philosophy. Yes, Ravi, did I unmute?
Yeah. I think I raised the issue already in the form of a message. And that was primarily directed at Aliya, basically. And now with this second intervention from Dr. Kathirasan, I would like to just ask him a little clarification, because what he said sounds very similar to what we have almost a book almost on with similar title from Ivan Thompson, where he speaks about these distinctions which we get from the early Indian tradition in the Upanishads, etc. Now, my question to him is, how do we sort of integrate that with a kind of approach with the scholars like, for instance, Ivan Thompson have been talking about of process philosophy? It's a self-clarification I'm seeking, because I've been struggling with, somehow to bridge this little gap that I see there. So I think now that I have an opportunity of asking this question to you, I would urge you to throw a little more light on that, because that's a kind of a dark spot in my understanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Ravi Singh, and being here. And maybe we will also request Aliya Grig to respond to that very interesting message which you shared in the chat box, which is, how do we explain the personal subjective nature of artificial consciousness? Will artificial consciousness have qualia?
Well, that's a great question because we should of course like bear in mind that I think that it's important, and I would say the crucial topic of the consciousness overall. So, and I think that it's important to train and to create the artificial consciousness in order to have this subjective experience, because that's also a nature of I would say a creativity and of the learning, and of, I would say, our interconnection with the world. And currently we are doing some experiments in virtual environments where we work with virtual agents in order to explain to them what is subjective experience is about. So we do this through virtual experimentation. So I think, yes, it's an important part, and thank you for noticing this this topic. I think it's highly important for the whole area of artificial consciousness.
Okay. And I don't know whether Dr. Jonardon would like to respond to the other question which he raised, or is that okay, Ravi Singh? I mean, do you want to say something now?
Yeah. I think there was a little spelling mistake there. I was just wondering if Aliya's approach, in some senses, commits her to some version of embracing some version of reductionism, because that's a very tricky path for me, because if we go towards reductionism, we sort of do away with the irreducibility of the subjective, the phenomenal. Because I always feel that it's one thing to create artifacts which can mimic and maybe even surpass or exceed our skills or our cognitive, you can say cognitive abilities, but quite another to experience all these things together as a concrete living human. So that's one question which always sort of troubles me when we talk of artificial consciousness, because is it just a tool, a kind of which can help us understand the human consciousness better, or it's almost, we are sort of, when we talk of replicating consciousness, are we talking of really creating a kind of a device which is maybe fine, different in terms of physical structure, but can it sort of mimic, or you can say feel or emote the way human beings do? These are the kind of challenges that I'm struggling with. Thank you.
Yes, so just as I previously mentioned, and I believe that it's important to mimic part of the human nature, and consciousness, while building it, can help us also to reveal, I would say, some secrets of the human nature which we are not 100% sure yet. And of course, like, it's important to make it at this time much closer as possible to human nature, because it's a key to creating, I would say, a new generation of machines. So of course, yes, the short answer is yes.
Okay, there's another question from a young student, Ritvik Khanna. Do I see you? Then I can unmute you. He's a graduate student. Yeah, and I think he's doing much more. Just introduce yourself and read out yours.
Hi. Thank you for bringing me on here. My name is Ritvik. I'm a recent graduate of English Literature from the University of Delhi. And much like Aliya, I'm working on an entrepreneurial pursuit. So I particularly have a question for her. So with the recent growth in space exploration, both in popular interest as well as in mapping space exploration as a whole, it has ignited philosophical discussions about our place in the universe and the nature of consciousness as a whole. How has your personal exploration of these topics influenced your approach to entrepreneurship and technology development, particularly with relation to Evolwe AI's goals? And in what ways do you think space exploration and the potential discovery of extraterrestrial life could impact our understanding of consciousness and the human condition?
Okay, that's quite a bit, Aliya.
Well, that's an easy question for me, because since childhood there were three topics that interested me. So the first one, it was our universe. Second one, it was consciousness. And third one, it's technologies. So basically, all my life, I was integrated in one or another. And for me, it's, I would say, an intersection of all of these three things. I was born in a family of astrophysicists, and that's why I had this huge interest towards space and space exploration since childhood. And I believe that, first of all, artificial consciousness can help us also to reveal the nature of our universe, that our consciousness, that us as a human beings are, I would say, a microcosmos, and around us it's macrocosmos. So all of these are related and probably have a one, I would say, background and origin, and I would say one formula. And that's why I'm building artificial consciousness, to understand both the nature of human being, the nature of our microcosmos, and to discover more about this macrocosmos. And about extraterrestrial life, well, we should first of all, I definitely think that there is something there. And of course, there is scientific discoveries already with probes on Mars and other planets, which showed like different molecules which are not connected with our planet. So definitely there is something, and probably these molecules can bring, I would say, and reveal new information about consciousness and the origins of the universe.
Thank you so much, Aliya. I see a few of familiar names here. At least I know them. So in case you have a question, just show up, just show your face so that I know that you may want to say. But otherwise, I'm also seeing the chat box, and we can share these comments and, your ideas to the conversationalists, and everybody is reading them. But I think my friend Ashwin Patil may like to say something here. And Ashwin Patil, could you please introduce yourself first, and then another very interesting personality from Bangalore. Yeah.
Thanks, Sangeetha. Hi, everyone. Well, I come from tech startup backgrounds. Been part of 4 successful tech startups. Been a founder of one of them, and my own pursuits in spirituality and non-dualism took me to the various schools, and I studied, non-duality, and also kind of experienced few things. Also kind of couple that with the cognitive and other sort of studies. The question I want to raise here is possibly about, if you look at the Advaita school, the non-dualism, that says that consciousness is all there is, and everything which we see as objects is kind of derived through it. So in a way, consciousness is experiencing itself. The question which comes to mind, that the way we are trying to understand consciousness, let's say, some of the points that artificial consciousness can help us understand the consciousness, kind of just brings us point that can object understand the subject, right? And that is one question I would like to just have some light from any of the participants.
Okay, so maybe we will request either Jonardon or Kadir to respond to, and Jonardon.
Oh, sorry, I didn't quite catch it. So you're saying, can an object have an awareness of a subject? Can you just restate the question slightly, because I didn't quite catch it?
I mean, if consciousness is all there is, and if we are trying to understand consciousness, which is the subject through which we are experiencing object, whether it is, thoughts, emotions, perceptions, right? Here, when we say that artificial intelligence can help us understand the consciousness, is it really possible? I mean, that's the question I'm raising.
Yeah, that sounds like a question that should be directed to Aliya, but for me, there's a distinction between artificial intelligence and artificial consciousness. Artificial intelligence is like the ability of a machine to solve complex problems, like chess or Go, or to move around in its environment like a robot does. Whereas artificial consciousness would have to be something different. It would have to be having an experience of the world that has that unique subjective quality that we associate with being conscious as opposed to being a zombie, And, we're in the territory of what David Chalmers called the hard problem of consciousness, that there's no way to reduce this subjective quality to any kind of functional or causal process. So unless the researchers into artificial consciousness can solve the hard problem of consciousness, what they're really doing is artificial intelligence and not artificial consciousness. That would be my view on it, but I'm not a scientist, I'm a philosopher.
Yes. Dr. Kadir, would you like to respond to him briefly, perhaps?
Yeah, certainly. Ashwin, you asked a great question. And I had this question even before AI became popular, which is the fact that whether an object can become aware of the subject. And it's not possible in my perspective. Now, for the mere reason that the object is pervaded by the consciousness itself. So when we look at it from that perspective, so when we bring artificial intelligence into this mix, into this inquiry, now anything that you can point at is not apart from consciousness from a non-dual perspective, right? Today we have artificial intelligence, tomorrow we may have something else. And that too would not be apart from consciousness. Anything that can be objectified cannot be that consciousness from a non-dual perspective. So therefore, the question about artificial intelligence, whether it's mimicking or whether it is imitating, I think is not the question here. I think the bigger question, which I also relate to the theme of this conversation, which is self and the age, is the ethical concerns that we may have. Is the ethical concerns that we may have around artificial intelligence. It is not a question around whether artificial intelligence is going to reveal absolute consciousness. I think it's a foregone conclusion from the perspective, at least Indian philosophy. It cannot. It cannot, because it is subject to time. It has a beginning, it would have an end, as with everything that can be objectified. However, the question then is the self being on the edge would be an ethical question. I'm not saying that it is unethical. I'm just saying that it brings up that question for us to think about the ethical nature of this transformation, this evolution, which belongs to the differentiated consciousness. It has got, while the absolute consciousness is not apart from it, but that inquiry, that investigation is something that pertains to human beings. It's human consciousness that we're talking about, which is primarily cognitive. So it's an ethical consideration that I see or I relate to as the self being at the edge.
All right. Thank you, Kadir. So now what I'll do is, since we have very limited time left and there are more people who want to say something, I'll just take the questions or comments from people. And then at the very end, we will request our friends to respond. So yeah.
I think Aliya, if I'm not mistaking her name. So she talked about artificial consciousness. So artificial intelligence, I see a role that helping the human beings improve, do the mundane things or improve and help them do more with their capacities. There I understand. But artificial, and that itself I question. I have questions on that artificial intelligence itself, that how self-destructive it could be. But those are questions, of course. And self-conscious, creating artificial consciousness, a bit, yes, exploring for curiosity, for understanding ourselves, I understand, but creating to what purpose? That is my question. And
okay.
Maybe
we'll move on because there are several other people.
I understand.
I think Anmol Agarwal has written something. That's a great question, actually. Linguistics does play a significant role in our thought process, but not the source of it necessarily. The movie Arrival deals with temporal non-locality of our memories via linguistics. So I request now Vishakha Sen to introduce yourself and very brief comment, please. Yes, please unmute yourself. Yes, sorry. Yes.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you for this conversation and podcast, and thank you all the resource persons. I would like to just comment that what today Sanjay Nair sir drew in a few minutes is, I think, the very gist of this
Nair.
question of Santosh Nair, the gist of this consciousness conversation, and how we explore the edge of self. Because if humans, as Santosh sir, if we as humans are able to draw what we think, what we feel visually, I think we are beyond and above artificial consciousness as it is being explored yet. So we give a tough competition to it. And I believe that the only way we can move forward is to let ourselves explore more than hinge on something that is termed as artificial consciousness itself.
All right.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Abhijit Sinha, please introduce yourself briefly and a brief comment, please.
Yes. I would like to just add, if I can make it clear, consciousness is the observation. The idea of separation makes you experience the observation in various patterns. So when you observe the space, you live in space, you are not separate from the space. The idea of space exploration exists because you are seeing in separation. So the consciousness is the observation. Anybody who observes anything is the consciousness.
Okay.
But when the consciousness is loaded with information, separation creates patterns.
Okay. All right. You didn't introduce yourself.
I'm Abhijit. I work for an organization in the education sector for the last 15 years. And I have interest in this, consciousness, unconsciousness movement.
Okay.
And I see a lot of, yeah.
Thank you for being here. Vismay Agrawal, please introduce yourself and brief comment, please. We have to soon conclude this program.
Thank you. So I am Visma Agrawal. I graduated from IIT Madras in 2021 with biomedical engineering design. I have practiced initially when I was in the Netherlands a lot into psychedelics. So the latest trend into psilocybin, 5-MeO-DMT, ayahuasca, those things. Then later on, I moved to Advaita Vedanta, which I did for a couple of years. Finally, right now, I am a Buddhist practitioner with quite a lot of Samatha Vipassana practice and access to jhanas. And what I wanted to add with my personal practice, that's something I have realized, and it's a good discussion later on with maybe Dr. Kathirasan, that saying consciousness is the absolute, Brahma Satyam. It's like saying consciousness is like the epistemological truth, the essence of everything. It exists. Whereas when you actually start investigating into everything in your mind, you see how consciousness is really tied up with perception, feeling tone, form, reactions. Then you start to see that anything which is in the mind, any made big perception or consciousness, you can't give it any higher place to anything else. So everything seems very tightly interconnected, and instead of saying consciousness as some epistemological, ontological truth, I'll say not self as an epistemological fact. When you actually realize and see that, brings a significant change in your suffering, because the mind changes its models. And this is all I wanted to say.
Okay. So maybe Aliya, since she has to move on to another meeting, maybe a few words. Aliya, you want to say something, and then we know that you have another meeting.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Sangeetha, for inviting here today. It was a great discussion, and I really appreciate the approach of other panelists and that amazing view on the nature of consciousness and different, I would say, perspectives of how we can investigate further And I wish lots of luck to all the researchers and scientists and the philosophers who work in this area, that all of us together are doing a great thing in order to investigate the nature of consciousness. And it's important for each of us and for the humanity overall. And I was happy to be here today.
Yes, thank you so much, Aliya. And I think the chat box is full of questions, comments, and trepidations. And many of them are also, I think, responding to the very interesting words which you shared. Thank you very much, Aliya. And I know that if you have to leave early, that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye. So may I request Dr. Kadir to respond to, I think, a couple of questions were pointed to you as well, I guess. Dr. Kadir?
Yeah, so I will respond because due to the recency bias, I can only remember Vismay's question. Or rather comment rather. So I would take the position, as you have said, is I call that there is an epistemological dimension in which epistemological way in which we understand consciousness. That's number one. So therefore, the way that we see consciousness, the way that we recognize and we identify with consciousness is very entirely pedagogical. I want to make this point. When I use the word pedagogical, meaning that how it is taught. And I don't subscribe to the view that non-dualism can be read. I don't take the view that non-dualism can be conceptualized. Non-dualism is pedagogical, therefore it has to be inquired with someone who sees that non-duality. So this is very much presented in an 8th century teacher called Shankara. Shankara wrote a text called Upadesha Sahasri where he presents the pedagogy. So to answer that question in a very short, my short response is pedagogical. So whether it's ontological or not is not the question, because how I see it depends on pedagogy, and that too with a person who sees the very thing, the very reality. Not that just because you don't see it doesn't mean that it is wrong or right, because I also subscribe to the concept of disposition. We all have different dispositions. We have different personalities, and we gravitate to a definition or description depending on that disposition. And that itself is an acceptance of reality. That's my response to that.
Thank you so much, Kathirasan. And I see another friend, Maria Karagiosova, whom I know. I think she works on very fascinating field and a lover of Kashmir Shaivism. Are you there, Maria? Just wanted to see you, and in case you wanted to say something. Maria?
Hi,
yes, hi.
Thank you
Maria.
very much.
Please introduce yourself and yes.
Hello. My name is Maria Karagiosova, as you can see, and I'm a PhD scholar, and I'm actually scholar practitioner. I study the creative process of consciousness for the last more than 10 years now. And I'm extending my topic. I study the idea of evolution of consciousness within the texts in Spanda school of Kashmir Shaivism and also Pratyabhigya. And then I'm intending to extend my topic of research on studying comparatively the creative process of consciousness with the creative process of artists, meditation practitioners.
Okay, thank you, Maria. I thought in case you wanted to say something about what you have heard, but that's fine. Otherwise,
that was very. I'm sorry. I just introduced myself. It's very interesting talk actually, and it raised a lot of questions, as we can see, especially on the side of Indian philosophy. I mean, all of us here we're united by that yes. Ultimate thought, and especially the idea of subjectivity. And also, I'm very much interested how it will be represented in artificial intelligence, the consciousness. Also, the topic of linguistic problem, which relates to in our idea, it relates more to the language of mantras than to the formal language. So there's so many questions that I have, but I hope that you're gonna organize something more than this event so we can really start discussing this.
Okay, thank you so much, and
thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you. I see many names. Ashish, Datta, I don't know whether you wanted to say something. If I can see you, I can unmute you. But Sunil Agarwala from New York, I know you are a practicing psychiatrist and in a very prestigious university. Sunil, would you like to show yourself and say something? I see that you are there. If I can see you, I can unmute you. Sunil, are you there? Okay, I don't see Sunil, but he is there. Ashish, Datta, maybe I'll ask. Okay, Sunil, you are there. Okay, can I see you? Then I can unmute yourself so that if you wish to share something. Okay, I can still see you, Sunil, so I'm unable to unmute yourself. Okay, let me just see. Okay, I see. Okay, I see you here, but I've just tried to I can't start my video. Actually, apologies. Okay. No problem. In case you wanted to say something,
Sunil, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Yes, Sunil.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for putting this wonderful.
Yourself. Please introduce yourself briefly.
Sure. My name's Sunil Agarwal. I'm a professor in psychiatry at Yale University in New Haven, and very much feeling honored to be a part of this discussion. I think it's a very complicated topic, and I appreciate it from the many viewpoints that have been mentioned today, and also I think from the way that it can help us to really figure out meaning in our lives, make sense of the world, make sense of ourselves in it. And I think many of the implications that come from our ideas of consciousness can really help with a more universal and combined worldview as well. So I believe that for our individual selves, if there is such a thing, and also our more global and universal consciousness, these discussions are very important. And so I thank you so much for putting this together.
Thank you, Dr. Sunil. And I think your area of work is very important because you are in the field and interacting with people from everywhere. And I'm sure you have a lot of insights, which perhaps we'll get to share one day more. And let me now ask Ashish Datta. Ashish, please introduce yourself.
I'm a generalist among all the specialists over there. So I dabble a bit in languages in the sense that though my bread and butter is in software, I have been writing on music, culture, travel for the past 20 years. My question, which is I often have thought, is language. Any language puts in constraints in our thoughts, in our thinking. So to what extent can the language as a tool be used to understand, express things which can only be perhaps perceived in a very supersensuous state of mind? And are there some languages which are more favorable than others in this respect?
Okay. Thank you so much, Ashish. It's a pleasure to see you again. And I think we are running out of time, and I'm sure there are several questions we can take. But I just wish to read out this one comment which is in the chat box, because I think it's an important comment. And that is Sanjeev Kumar. I don't know whether he's still there, but let me read it out. I think the sociological dimension of consciousness should be looked into, I think, only when we equip a larger proportion of the global population with basic necessities to ensure human flourishing, that the right questions about consciousness can be asked. At present, consciousness remains in the realm of the ineffable and solely experiential. And I think that is something which is really pointing to the grounded earth beneath our feet, and extremely important idea which is shared. So I think we are moving on to the closure. And thank you, all of you, for raising your hand. But please share your ideas in the chat box, and we will get it to the people around. And you can always message me by WhatsApp or email. And let me now ask the panelists to give their concluding views. Or, I mean, it's not conclusion, but, before we leave and wind up, would you like to say something? Because you heard people, and the chat box is full, I can see, and many people have gotten an opportunity. But considering this very large spectrum of people here today, Dr. Jonardon, what would your comments be before you leave? But maybe, may I just pause there and request Santosh, maybe he has something to show us. I shouldn't forget that he is weaving some magic behind the curtains. Santosh? Wow. Okay, there we are. I hope people are looking at it and how magnificently he has captured what's going on, how he has derived meanings perhaps in a completely different perspective of what we spoke, what we didn't speak, and how he has converted the voices, the ideas, and the text to perhaps another world altogether, and what insights can his creative work can bring to us. I think it's absolutely amazing to see his work, the magical space of perhaps what only Santosh can create to us. Thank you so much, Santosh. And we will share this with all our participants as well once this program is over. But there are so many ideas we can look into in this larger frame and discuss. Thank you so much, Santosh. All right, maybe as Santosh shares his slide, may I request Jonardon to make your comments?
Yes, well, I think this is an amazing space that you've created, Sangeet, bringing together, people at the cutting edge of artificial intelligence, as well as musicians and artists and scientists and psychologists, and even the odd humble philosopher, all together to have a conversation about such a crucial question about the nature of consciousness and the nature of selves. So I think it's a really terrific venture that you're doing, and I hope that this is just the first of many, many future conversations. So thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of it.
Thank you so much, Jonardon, and it is such a pleasure to have you. And your work is known to anyone who is working on consciousness studies. And I think, being a philosopher myself and many other philosophers who have joined this meeting, it has been a real privilege to talk to you, Jonardon, and we hope we can be in touch with you and this conversation can continue. Dr. Kadir?
Thank you, Sangeetha, for having me. I want to mention that
I just wanted to interrupt there for 1 second and request that Santosh Nair and his colleague is continuing their magic in the frame, so you can view at that as well and listen to Dr. Kadir.
Thank you, Sangeetha, for having me. It's such a pleasure. I want to say that this session was great, was very insightful for the fact that I believe that questions are far more insightful than answers, to be honest. So I found that this session generated so many questions, and that's that's the beginning of learning, with questions. And the fact that we had more questions than answers made my presence here so much worthwhile. I enjoyed, and I'm learning from all the questions as well as all the responses. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And thanks for having me, Sangeetha.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kadir. And I think what you said is so true, because often we look for final answers and certainties and validating our assumptions, preconceived notions. But we thought this would be consciousness conversation space would be where we leave our questions, and then we continue from there as well. We may have tentative answers. We may not have final answers, because life is something to be lived, and these answers have to be found in our life than in the answers perhaps which we would generate intellectually alone, because otherwise consciousness would remain as a very abstract idea, as someone said, but that's not what we want to do. And also the whole goal of consciousness conversation is to bring people together. So just by being together, you create a different feeling about it, a different experience all about it. And just watch what Santosh Nair is doing there. And, he's capturing the insights of questions with the very unique way of his colors, his forms, and his own creative way of capturing what we discussed is just amazing. So once again, let me remind you that consciousness conversation is a space where we can share as much as possible just by being together. And by being together, a lot can be done. And it's not necessarily that only words, ideas, and theories would help us. So thank you very much, because I have taken 15 minutes more. I wish to thank everyone, Jonardon, Dr. Jonardon, Dr. Kathirasan, Maria, Aliya Grig, and Santosh Nair, his colleague, and all the participants who have joined this meeting, and who could share their questions, who could just be there. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. We hope to bring in another set of very interesting conversationalists in another date, which we will announce perhaps sooner than later. So thank you, everybody. Take care wherever you are. Thank you very much. Thank you, Santosh. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Bye-bye.
A pleasure. Bye-bye.